Since April 12, 1961, when Yuri Gagarin became the first man to venture beyond Earth's atmosphere, the Russians have sent over 100 cosmonauts into the vast ocean of emptiness we call space. The space program in the old USSR was impressive, but so was the secrecy that surrounded the missions. Still, shortly after the collapse of the USSR in 1991, many previously classified documents magically began to appear in the United States. These documents revealed many fascinating things that the West once knew nothing about. These include the fact that Russian cosmonauts had seen remarkable things in space. These sightings go far beyond anything one would expect to see in a lifeless and empty void. Many high-ranking officials have even gone on record to disclose what they really think about life beyond Earth. In 1980, legendary Soviet magazine Sputnik wrote a lengthy report on extraterrestrial life. 10 Soviet cosmonauts and 2 American astronauts were asked to comment publicly. However, only one was willing to do so, Yevgeny Krunov. He said, "With regards to UFOs, their presence cannot be denied." When asked about their incredible characteristics, Krunov added, "Some of their properties simply staggers the imagination. For example, their ability to change course by 90 degrees at great speed." Pioneer cosmonaut Major General Pavel Popovich states, "The historical data suggests that ever since humanity has been coexisting with this remarkable phenomenon, it has obviously exhibited a high level of intelligence and technology." When asked what we could do regarding the UFO subject, Popovich added, "To realize our position in the universe, the scientific study of the UFO phenomenon should be placed among the other sciences. If that is done, the conclusions of these scientific investigations might aid the survival of the human race." Soviet Air Force colonel, engineer, and decorated Soviet test pilot Dr. Marina Popovich wrote about the UFO phenomena in her book UFO Glasnost, first published in 2003. Popovich claims there have been over 3,000 UFO sightings by Soviet military and civilian pilots alone. Even more interesting than that statement is her claim that the Soviet Air Force recovered fragments of downed UFOs at 5 different locations. Popovich said the debris had been analyzed and the results confirmed that the materials could not have been manufactured on Earth. Gagarin himself is quoted as saying, "UFOs are real, and they fly at incredible speeds." Gagarin also said he would reveal more about what he had seen in orbit, provided approval was given to do so. It never was. Cosmonauts, like astronauts, are carefully chosen and tested before being sent into space. Therefore, when we hear several of them have seen unidentified objects while on their missions, we should take them seriously. Soviet orbital space station Soyuz 6 was launched into space by a Proton rocket on September 29, 1977. It became the most successful DOS series before Mir, spending a remarkable 4 years 10 months in space and completing 27,785 orbits of the Earth in the process. During this time, 5 main expeditions and 11 short-duration expeditions visited the station. Most went smoothly and without incident. However, that changed on June 17, 1978, when an object similar to an oversized tennis ball with the brightness of a flaring star was detected at least half a mile from Soyuz 6. According to cosmonaut Vladimir Kovalenok's report, the craft was flying in a straight line but then closed rapidly to a distance of 300 feet, as if it was observing them. Then something remarkable happened. A beautiful golden light erupted from the craft. A few seconds later, a second eruption occurred, and 2 brilliant yellow spheres appeared. Kovalenok and co-pilot Alexander Ivanchenkov flew eastwards, entering the darkness of the Earth's shadow and losing sight of the 2 objects. Interestingly, Kovalenok's report stated that the nose of the object resembled a gyrating depressed cone. At the tail end was something like a gas discharge, like a reactive object. Kovalenok considered the phenomenon a plasmoid explosion. But the instrument readings indicated that the object was emitting only neutrons without the same number of protons. That is, the object was artificial. Interestingly, just over 3 years later, in May 1981, a second, much longer UFO encounter involving Major General Vladimir Kovalenok occurred. Again, this was while he was on board the Salyut 6 space station. The tale describes how the cosmonauts tried to initiate contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence. The report says an alien spaceship flew in tandem with the Salyut 6 for 2 days. Kovalenok tried to communicate via Morse using a powerful flashlight. There was no reply. Kovalenok signaled again, "Are you receiving us?" in English, but again the beings did not reply. Apparently, these beings even left the UFO and surrounded the portholes for a close encounter. In 1993, in a videotaped interview with the Italian Giorgio Bongiovanni, Kovalenok admitted the UFO sighting took place in 1981. They were wearing light helmets, Kovalenok said. When the Italian reporter asked Kovalenok to describe the beings, they sounded very similar to numerous statues and figurines that have been unearthed in ancient Sumeria. Kovalenok said they had thick and long eyebrows and straight noses, like ancient statues. What stood out most for Kovalenok was the eyes, which he described as large and blue, twice as large as ours, without a trace of emotion. According to the story, the cosmonauts recorded the incident. This was apparently shown in a 1981 conference with the chief of the Soviet space program, General Georgy Timofeyevich Beregovoy, in attendance. As far as we know, the footage has never been seen since. Another curious account from the Salyut 6 happened at night on June 14, 1980, but would only come to light 11 years later in 1991 when a Russian newspaper published a full report. This time, cosmonauts Valery Ryumin and Leonid Popov observed a cluster of white shining spots climb up into space from Moscow. According to the cosmonauts, they actually flew up higher than the spacecraft. Interestingly, UFO sightings were widely seen from the ground on the same night. Launched on April 19, 1982, the Salyut 7 space station's mission was to carry out scientific experiments in space, where it remained for a total of 8 years and 10 months. As with Salyut 6, Salyut 7 would also witness some very odd phenomena. The first incident happened on July 7, 1984. Day 155 seemed like a regular day with 3 highly qualified cosmonauts, Oleg Atkov, Vladimir Solivev, and Leonid Kizim on board, conducting standard scientific experiments. However, what followed is a bizarre series of events that cannot simply be written off as space debris, and has led many researchers to believe the cosmonauts had a genuine encounter with extraterrestrial, or possibly even divine, entities. The event started when a strange orange mist engulfed and then seeped through the solid walls into the space station. At this point, the light's intensity was so bright that Atkov, Solivev, and Kizim became momentarily blinded. When the light softened and the cosmonauts' vision returned, they immediately checked the craft for structural damage, but the station seemed to be in good shape. They then peered out of the porthole and saw something even more incomprehensible than the orange light. Just outside the craft was a group of 7 gargantuan 80 feet tall celestial beings, with a wingspan estimated to be over 700 feet. Their face and body were similar to a human, each with a halo-like glow around their head. This is a classic description of something we have been told only exists in fairy tales: angels. These humanoid-like creatures kept pace with the space station for 10 minutes before disappearing. This left both the cosmonauts and the crew at Mission Control totally baffled. Although they did find an excuse: group hallucination. This fascinating and mysterious incident sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie. And if there were only 3 cosmonauts involved, maybe one could be forgiven for having doubts about the story's authenticity. However, this was not the end of this contact event, and as you will hear, a further 3 astronauts would witness an almost identical scene. On day 167, almost 2 weeks later, Svetlana Savitskaya, Igor Volk, and Vladimir Zanivebok joined the crew from the Soyuz T-12 spacecraft, and the celestial beings returned. The spacecraft once again became bathed in warm orange light. Just like the first incident, they were joined by angelic beings reportedly the size of an airliner. According to the cosmonauts, the entire space station became filled with a feeling of peace and calm. Svetlana Savitskaya described them in an interview with Russian television. Through glowing orange light, we could see the figures of 7 angels. They were smiling as if they just shared a marvelous secret, but a few minutes later they vanished, and we never saw these magnificent beings again. The group hallucination theory is blown out of the water by the second incident. When the astronauts arrived back on Earth, they were told the entire episode had been classified, and therefore the incident was buried. However, on the subject of hallucinations, in 1994, Russian cosmonaut Valery Vladimirovich Polyakov broke the record for the longest time spent in space continuously by an individual in human history. While he was there on the Mir space station, he also witnessed some very odd things, or what some might call altered states of consciousness. At certain times during his stay, he had multiple visions that made it seem as though he had morphed into a weird creature such as an animal, a monster, and even an extraterrestrial humanoid. Cosmonauts have frequently witnessed strange, inexplicable events occurring in space. Vladimir Kovalenok, for instance, a pioneer of space exploration, claims that while on board the Soyuz 25 spacecraft, a tape recorder turned on by itself and began playing his favorite movie. Kovalenok said that many of his colleagues had witnessed unusual things while on board their space station, but they have decided not to bring those issues to the public attention. The Mir space station is no stranger to unusual encounters. In March 1993, cosmonaut Musa Manarov, who was simply watching a visiting space capsule dock nearby theirs, recorded actual footage of a glimmering cigar-shaped UFO hovering around the Mir space station for over 2 minutes. According to some researchers, this is unquestionably one of the best examples of UFO footage ever taken in space. When asked what he saw, Manarov replied, "I still cannot explain it." We have only scraped the surface with these unusual cases. Undoubtedly, many more reports have not yet been released, and perhaps they never will be. Still, what has been released is fascinating, but how do we explain them? One would think cosmonauts would know what they are seeing, or are we supposed to ignore everything they have said? When combined with what American astronauts have seen and continue to see above Earth's atmosphere, one must wonder what is happening in space.